You're listening to Radio Lucet. I'm your host, Steve Matthews. Thanks for joining me for episode 60. The title of this episode is Rome and the World Day for Migrants and Refugees. Well, before we get into all that, I just wanted to say once again, welcome to everybody. Thanks for coming here and joining me on this day. Well, I guess it's actually very early on a Sunday. It's September 26, 2021. And of course, now we're just about a week into fall, at least officially. I guess what do they call that? The autumnal equinox was back on the 26th or the 21st, excuse me. So 5 days ago. So we're a little bit into fall, and I have to admit I'm kind of a summer person, and I always hate to see summer go, but fall does have some nice things about it. One of the things about fall is, of course, it's some of the nicest weather in Cincinnati, where I am here in Southwest Ohio. It's you lose some of the humidity that you have over the summer, but you still have some really nice weather. I mean, we got highs in the mid 70s today. It's sunny. I mean, it's typically pretty sunny in the fall. Things tend to dry out. We get a lot of sunny weather in the fall, and some very pleasant days. Not it's summer like, but it's not quite so oppressive. Like back in July and August, where you can have these really humid days, and it can seem very oppressive. You can get out and do stuff. I went out and went bike riding today. I did 24 miles here. That's a pretty good ride, I think. And I really didn't sweat all that much. And I went out and I worked in the yard, and it was the same thing. I spent a lot of time outside today, and I was perfectly comfortable the whole time. So yeah, that was really nice. It's always nice to get out on a beautiful Saturday. It's a real blessing to be able to do that, and get out from in front of the TV screen and all those kinds of things, and get out and do some work in the world, in the real world. Well, I guess this is the real world too, but I spend so much time in front of the computer, whether it's doing things like writing or podcasting or just my job. I mean, I spend all day in front of a computer doing my job. So it's nice to be able to get out, and it's always enjoyable to be able to do that on a Saturday. Of course, one thing I don't like about fall is, of course, the days get shorter, and it seems like it's getting to be dark pretty early here now. I think the sun sets about 7:30. So yeah, I'm not so wild about that. And I guess the other thing about fall is, of course, I know what's on the other side of fall. I know where we're heading, and of course, that's to winter. And I don't like winter. I never have. Probably never will. I've gone through it my whole life. Still don't like it, but oh well. That's just the way it is. Well, I wanted to talk this week. This is another podcast I wanted to deal with Rome and the immigration issue, because there's just, you know, I think one of the things that is very often missed by people is just how big of uh, how deeply involved the Roman Catholic Church is in creating the immigration problems that we have here in the United States. And in fact, I'm going to see. I know I've used this before. Okay, yeah, here it is. For instance, here's a headline. I'm going to do a little screen share here, see if we can get this to work the way we want to. And that's not what I really wanted to do. Let's try that again. Let's do the window. There we go. There we go. Yeah, now this is a headline, and this is from a Newsmax article from back in 2018. It's got a headline here. It says Bannon. It's talking about Steve Bannon. You can see a picture here. Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon was one of, I think he was Donald Trump's chief political strategist for, I don't know, most of the first year of the Trump administration. And Steve Bannon's a Roman Catholic, but he's a Roman Catholic. I think he's enough of an American patriot, and I think he's honest enough to come out and talk about the role of the Roman Catholic Church in promoting mass immigration. In fact, here's the quote here. I'll just read this to you. It says, "The Pope, more than anybody else, has driven the migrant crisis in Europe," declared Bannon, who is Catholic. The Catholic Church, I've gone after New York Archbishop Cardinal Timothy Dolan. The Catholic Church is one of the worst instigators of this open borders policy. And he's absolutely right. And in fact, I might even say that the Catholic Church is the worst instigator of open borders, mass migration, welfareism. And of course, the reason Rome does that, the principal reason that Rome is doing this is because Rome hates independent or sovereign nation states. I don't really like to use the term sovereign because, of course, sovereign really properly belongs to God, but we use that term, and it's kind of hard not to use it when we're talking about the system of nation states that exists. Sometimes it's called Westphalian sovereignty. And as you might guess from the title of the term, or the term Westphalian sovereignty, it has to do the creation of the nation state system that resulted from the Treaty of Westphalia, which settled the 30 Years' War in 1648. And of course, the 30 Years' War, and this is something that Protestants really need to understand this, but this is simply not taught very often. But the 30 Years' War was a war between the Protestant states of Europe and the Roman Catholic Church, and the Protestants won. The good guys won that battle because they didn't want to be ruled by Rome any longer. These Protestant nations, these nations that had been heavily influenced by the Protestant Reformation over the prior 100 plus years, didn't want to be part. They didn't want to be ruled. They didn't want to be governed by the Pope, and they won that fight. They won that fight against the Pope, and what it did is it created the modern world. We have this system of nation states, and the term that's used for that is Westphalian sovereignty, or the Westphalian world order. We talk about the Westphalian world order. You've probably heard people talk about the New World Order, but there's a thing, the organization of nations in this world that's called the Westphalian world order, and it just has to and when it has to do with how each nation is considered. Every nation, regardless of how small, how large, how rich, how poor, every nation has a right to basically govern its own affairs within its own borders. That's what Westphalian sovereignty is all about, without being interfered from the outside. In other words, the U.S. has a right to run. America has a right to run American affairs within our country. In Canada or Mexico or other countries don't have a right to interfere with that. And likewise, Mexico and Canada, they have a right to run their own affairs without the U.S. interfering in their internal affairs. That's not the job. Now, of course, that interference of one country, no, that does go on. I mean, it shouldn't go on, but that's the idea behind Westphalian sovereignty, behind the Westphalian world order. And of course, the Pope has always hated that, because when the Roman Catholic Church lost the 30 Years' War, they lost the ability to control nations, at least directly. And for the ensuing, I guess, we're over 300 years. We're going on close to 400 years since the settlement, since the Peace of Westphalia. The Roman Catholic Church is constantly trying to find ways to overthrow the Westphalian world order and reinstitute a globalism. And of course, what the Roman Catholic Church wants to do is they want to scale up and do globally what they did in Western Europe during the Middle Ages. It's kind of scalable tyranny. They want this thing to, they want to take this thing truly global. That is the stated goal, the express goal, the very clear goal of the Roman Catholic Church state. And that is really the reason behind all their push for migration. That is a tool in the toolbox of the papal antichrist for breaking down sovereign nations and making them ungovernable, and eventually folding them into a worldwide system. That's the idea. That's what's going on here, and I think it's important that Christians understand that. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Pope and the World Day for Migrants and Refugees. One thing I wanted to talk about, maybe a little bit before we get too far into that, maybe stop the screen share here, is the immigration moral panic of the week, which, of course, this past week, it had to do with the Border Patrol supposedly whipping Haitian migrants, and that was all a lot of nonsense. But I really have to think that the whole purpose behind that story was really an attempt to shift the narrative, because, of course, the Biden people have been getting extremely bad press, and deservedly so, for the mess that they created on the southern border. The Some of the migrants actually call the policy of the Biden administration. They call it la invitación. La invitación. Now you don't have that's Spanish, and of course you don't have to know a lot of Spanish to be able to figure out what that means. La invitación is simply just means the invitation. And they're saying that Joe Biden invited them to come up and basically storm the southern border. And he did. I mean, that is absolutely what he did. There's no question about it. And so came they did. Um, get into America and get free stuff at taxpayer expense. And this is a huge problem, and it's been very embarrassing in some ways to the Biden administration. In fact, there are so many thousands upon thousands of these migrants that are crossing over and setting up these camps in various places along the southern border that the Biden administration, I should really call it the Biden regime because that's what it is. It's not a legitimate government, in my opinion. Um, but they've actually banned the news organizations from flying drones over and taking pictures of all these huge migrant camps that have occurred because of the policies that they instituted. So, I mean, they create this gigantic mess, but they don't want you to know about it as an American. You're not supposed to know about these things. You're not supposed to see that stuff. And they're going to make sure that you don't see that stuff. But it gets out anyway. But the thing is, of course, and this is what's disturbing, is that for a lot of people, if things aren't showing up in the mainstream press, if they don't see them in the New York Times or CNN or the Washington Post or ABC, NBC, CBS or something like that, or NPR, those things don't exist. They don't exist for them. So I mean, can limit if you can limit the reach of those kinds of stories to alternative outlets, most people don't see them. And it allows people and it allows them to divert attention away from this gigantic treasonous mess that the Biden administration has created, and instead focus on this false fake news about the border patrol supposedly whipping people. And here's another do another screen share. Here's an article, and this is kind of typical of the things you're seeing. This is from the BBC. But the headline is Biden, people will pay for horseback charge on migrants at border. And here's what Biden has to say here. In his first public remarks in a situation in Del Rio, Texas, where thousands of mostly Haitian migrants massed this week, Mr. Biden added, quote, I promise you those people, and he's talking about the Border Patrol, those people will pay. They will be investigated. There will be consequences, end quote. Now, of course, there aren't going to be consequences to the people that are violating immigration law. There can be consequences of people who are trying to enforce American immigration law. I mean, this is just calling good evil and evil good. And of course, that's something that the Bible condemns, that the Word of God condemns. But of course, we have a very perverse mindset in the White House. And one of the things that's interesting, I'm going to try to click around here. I thought I saved this article. Yeah, maybe I didn't save it. I'll stop the screen share here for a moment. But there was an article out where the fellow there's actually a picture. Maybe you saw it. It's kind of become a bit of an iconic picture, I guess, if you can have a picture become iconic in the course of a week or so. But there was a fellow who took this picture. Oh yeah, here it is. Yeah, the photographer. Let me do a screen share for this. Yeah, the photographer who took this picture. And let's get that up here. There we go. Yeah, so this is from the Washington Times. It says photographer says Border Patrol agents didn't whip the Haitian migrants. And the fella, his name is, oh golly, no, I have that here somewhere. Oh, this is what he says. This is what the photographer said. He says he's talking about the Border Patrol. He says he was swinging it, I guess, his reins, but he didn't see him actually whip someone with it. The photographer told the station. That's something that can be misconstrued when you're looking at it. He's talking about the picture there. So yeah, the fellow that took this picture, he even denies the fact that the Border Patrol was whipping these Haitian migrants. But of course, you're not supposed to know that either. I mean, that's not the sort of thing that's going to get a whole lot of publicity out there. But you've got this president, this evil president that we have, who's out there denouncing the men who are trying to quite properly enforce federal law and defend the United States of America. But of course, Joe Biden hates the United States of America because he's an agent of Rome. That is what he is. He is a son of Rome. He's a son of Antichrist. He's even got a picture of he and Pope Francis in the Oval Office. Sits right behind the Resolute desk. I guess it's still there. I know it was there earlier in his administration. I assume he wouldn't remove something like that. So yeah, it's a real problem. Joe Biden is, and of course those people who support him and defend him. Uh, the next thing I wanted to talk about here, and this was kind of the driver for the program here today, was the World Day of Migrants, and I actually got to talking to thinking about this by an article that I came across. I wasn't even really looking for it this morning. Um, it actually came across in my Google Alerts feed. Now, if you don't know about Google Alerts, and if you like, say, following particular stories, particular ideas or themes, this is a really good thing. You can actually go to google.com and you can set alerts if you have Gmail for Google to search the web and send you alerts on a particular topic. And one of the alerts that I have set uh, is a Roman Catholic Church and immigration. And I have some variants on that, but every day I've got it set up so that it'll send me a digest of it, just an email with links with those search terms in it from all over the web. And you can find a lot of stories on maybe subjects you're interested in, even if they're not necessarily maybe sources that you go to all the time. So if you do like doing some research online to find out things that are going on in the world, things like immigration, for example, that's a good thing to do, and I recommend that you do that. It's a great way to do some research and to kind of cut down the amount of time you have to do clicking around on different websites. Well, anyway, my Google Alerts had sent me this particular story this morning. This was from the Washington Times, and the headline here says Catholic groups say Biden border policy violates church's teaching. Well, good grief! Now, I mean, we've already talked a little bit about here this evening. About how the Biden administration issued what the migrants themselves are calling the invitation, or la invitación in Spanish. And of course, you may have seen some of these pictures of stuff going on at the border, and just how thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people. I mean, some of those images that were shown over the past week of all these Haitians coming across the Rio Grande was just stunning. And in fact, here's the story. I'll do another screen share here. Here's the story. You can see the headline: Catholic groups say Biden border policy violates church's teaching. And the subheadline there is Coalition says pandemic border expulsions are too cruel. And it's got this photo here, and it shows all these Haitians going across. I guess it's some kind of it's submerged, but it looks like it's some kind of a dam or something just under the surface of the water, and they're just literally just walking right across the Rio Grande and on into the United States. And there are some photographs that shows people going to the United States and others going back to Mexico, and it's just a great big old back and forth fest. They're just wading through the river. And anyway, this particular, I'll read this here to you. The article starts off by saying, quote, a coalition of 164 Catholic groups. Did you know there's 164 Catholic groups? I guess apparently there's at least that many. But a coalition of 164 Catholic groups sent a letter to President Biden on Thursday telling him border policies violate the tenets of his own faith and urged him to embrace Pope Francis' teachings. The groups blasted the pandemic border expulsion authority known as Title 42, which the government says gives it the power to immediately turn back illegal immigrants without giving them the chance to make claims for protection in the U.S. Now, of course, Title 42, what that is, it's about not allowing people to come into the United States from countries that have, I guess, a high incidence of infectious diseases. So, I mean, of course, what have we heard about here for the last, well, it's going on 2 years now? They were all going to die from COVID. We have to be locked down. We have to have our businesses shut down. We have to wear masks. Now, of course, the Biden administration is trying to force a poison vaccine on all of us. And we have to do all of these things. But the thought of keeping people out of the country who are COVID positive, well, that's just an outrage, and that can't be allowed. So you and I get cracked down upon as hard as possible by the government. But migrants, I can just walk into the country. It doesn't matter what kind of disease they're carrying. And of course, that's just one more example to tell you, first of all, how bogus the whole COVID thing is. It's obviously bogus. And number two, the fact that this government is hostile to the American people. They hate the American people. I mean, Joe Biden does. I mean, that's very obvious. Um, and that's of course another thing that you can get from the fact that they're allowing this to go on the border. And of course, the Roman Catholic Church hates the American people. The Roman Catholic Church wants to see the United States overthrown. The Roman Catholic Church has always hated the United States of America. It hates any independent nation, but I think perhaps maybe and especially the United States of America, because it's been a large, successful, historically, if not currently, Protestant nation. And of course, they want to get rid of that. So I thought what I'd do is I'd take a look. It talks here in the article. A coalition of 164 Catholic groups sent a letter to President Biden on Thursday telling him his border policies violate the tenets of his own faith. So what does this particular letter say? Well, here's a copy of that letter. Maybe we can blow that up a little bit here. See how that looks on the screen share. I don't know. It's dated September 23rd, which I guess was that was Thursday, just this past Thursday. And here's what the letter says. Ahead of the 107th World Day for Migrants and Refugees on September 26, 2021, we, the undersigned 164 Catholic organizations, reach out in shared faith to urge you to end the use of Title 42 immediately. Pope Francis offers us two paths for the future in his recent encyclical Fratelli Tutti, writing, once this health crisis passes, God willing, we will think no longer in terms of them and those, but only us. The continuation of the Trump era change Title 42 and is taking our country down the wrong path. Well, I completely disagree with all of that. And basically what this letter does, and I'm not going to get into in a whole lot of detail, but basically they're just mad that the Biden administration apparently isn't destroying the United States of America fast enough for their taste. That's what it comes down to. And here at the bottom of the letter, you can see all the different Roman Catholic organizations that signed this thing. And oh, look at that. We got some Jesuits here. The Ignatian Solidarity Network, the Jesuit Conference Office of Justice and Ecology, Jesuit Refugee Service USA. So yeah, and on and on and on it goes. It breaks it out here by state too. I wonder if there's anybody here from Ohio. Let's see. I'm sure there is. Ohio Nuns on the Bus, Community of St. Peter, and Community Justice of Peace Center of Cincinnati, and blah, 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 blah. So yeah, there are a lot of treasonous Roman Catholic organizations out there attempting to overthrow the United States of America with mass taxpayer subsidized migration. And they're perfectly happy doing it. They think that's a great idea and a good thing. Now, the occasion, of course, for this particular letter, as you may have noticed, is the 107th World Day for Migrants. So what's the World Day for Migrants? Well, if you go over, and this is actually an official Vatican website. I'm just showing this here on the screen share again. It says here, and so this is in the church's own statement here. It says, the church has been celebrating the World Day of Migrants and Refugees, WDMR, it calls it, since 1914. And it has a link here to the Pope's. I guess he's going to give this homily or message or whatever on Sunday the 26th. And it's called Toward an Ever Wider We. And if you actually download this thing, basically what you do is you find that the Pope doesn't like, he denounces nationalism and he denounces individualism. He says, quote, our we, both in the wider world and within the church, is crumbling and cracking due to myopic and aggressive forms of nationalism and radical individualism. Well, I mean, bottom line is, of course, the Roman Catholic Church hates nationalism, as we talked about earlier, as I mentioned earlier. They hate, loathe, and despise the idea of independent or sovereign nations because those nations are not under the control of the Pope. He can't tell them what to do, he can't boss them around. And of course, the Pope thinks he has the right to boss everybody around everywhere in the world. He's the little horn of Daniel speaking great things. That's the office of Antichrist. That's what the Pope is. That's what he's doing. And he's very, very, very upset at anybody who tells him, there's a limitation on this power. That's like tugging on Superman's cape or something along those lines. Um, let's see. Maybe I can find this here. If you want to get a sense of just how megalomaniacal the popes of Rome really are, and how much they hate, and I mean really hate the idea of independent nations. There is let's see if I can find this here. And I probably should have had this up. But yeah, there's an article. It's out. I've got it saved someplace. I'm not going to bother to try to look it up right now. But there's an article that I had saved someplace where the Pope just absolutely just goes off. His head just basically explodes. He has a meltdown. I guess if you want to use the current way we talk about those things, the Pope actually just had a total meltdown when it came to the Treaty of Westphalia, and I mean he didn't like it even a little bit. And well, maybe here it is. Let's see if we can get something here. That's not what we want. Let's try this. That's not what we want either. Let's try that again. Oh well. Anyway, I don't have it handy. Enough of that stuff. But yeah, anyway, I wish I had the quote here in front of me right now because the Pope just absolutely just has a meltdown at the idea of the Treaty of Westphalia, and he's not going to be able to boss everybody around. And so for the past almost 400 years, of course, the Roman Catholic Church has been trying to reassert its control over the nations of the world. These guys don't give up. They really don't. And of course, as Protestants, as Christians, I mean, we have to be aware of that, and we cannot be lulled into this false sense of security. Supposing that that somehow the bad old days are behind us and we don't have to worry about this stuff anymore. But yeah, so the Pope, he openly denounces individualism because, of course, he's a collectivist. He calls it radical individualism. Somehow it's really, really bad. Oh no. So what's radical individualism? Well, I mean, I think what most people would just call individualism. Um, the Pope attacks. One of the ways he attacks individualism is he attacks the idea of private property. There was he the Pope in his message, he's citing his encyclical last year, Fratelli Tutti, brothers all is the way that translates. And one of the ideas that he pushes in Fratelli Tutti, in fact, this is even admitted here by another Roman Catholic, a fellow by the name of Robert Barron. And this was something that was published in a publication called the Boston Pilot last fall, November of 2020. And this Bishop Robert Barron talks about the idea of the universal destination of goods in Fratelli Tutti. So Fratelli Tutti, again, brothers all, that was Pope Francis' 2020 encyclical. And the universal destination of goods, that is a super important concept. And you may have heard me talk about it. I'm sure I've talked about that in other podcasts, and I've written about it some on my blog. But the idea of the universal destination of goods means you really don't own the stuff that you think you own. In the Roman Catholic Church, need is the only moral criterion for ownership. So if you built something, if you bought something, if you inherited something, none of those things give you a moral title to property. It's need only. So, for instance, if somebody from Haiti needs a better standard of living, well, they have a right to barge in the United States and take it. They can throw themselves on the dole and get bailed out by American taxpayers. And that not only does Rome not think that that's wrong, they think that that's positively righteous. And they think that it's positively righteous for the government to take your stuff and give it to foreigners because they need it and supposedly you don't. Well, need has nothing to do with it. That is not a basis for ownership. That is not biblical. There is nothing in the Bible that defends the universal destination of goods. That is a bogus concept. It comes out of through Thomas Aquinas. And I think it traces back to that. And I think I'd have to double check on this, but I think that's something that probably may even trace back to Aristotle. But I'd have to look at it, of course, because Thomas Aquinas was very much influenced by Aristotle. But it's this false idea of ownership. It's an attack on private property. John Robbins talked about this in his book Ecclesiastical Megalomania, and he called private property the I don't recall his exact words, but he said something like it is the most important institution in a civilized society. Well, um, the Roman Catholic Church it constantly is attacking private property, and of course, one of the when with Rome's attitude toward private property, the fact that they do not have they do not have a scriptural, they do not have a godly view of private property. This is one of the reasons why Roman Catholic run churches, countries, nations that are heavily influenced by the Roman Catholic Church have so much poverty. Because they attack the very basis by which people are able to lift themselves out of poverty. They attack the institution of private property. And, by doing so, they destroy the incentive for people to work. And this is a very evil thing, and it's not something that was that just Pope Francis talks about. You can find this continually throughout the Roman Catholic social teaching, which goes back all the way to 1891, or with the publication. There was a famous encyclical published. It's called Rerum Novarum, which means new things. And that's sort of the really beginning of the formal development of Roman Catholic social teaching. And you can find this attack on private property going all the way back to then, and of course even before that. But it's really been developed over the past, well, I guess it's 130 years at this point. So the Pope's encyclical Fratelli Tutti, which is a big jumping off point for his lectures to people uh, for his position on immigration. It's all based on a fraudulent, bogus idea of private property, an attack on individualism, an attack on the nation state. And these are all things that are unbiblical, they're ungodly, they tend toward tyranny. And of course, the Roman Catholic Church is they love tyranny. I mean, they want to reinstitute the Middle Ages, and again, do that on a truly global scale. And I think that's if they get away with it, that's what we're going to be looking at. So anyway, that's really about all I had here for you this week. Sorry, I feel like I was rambling a little bit here, but anyway, that's all I wanted to talk about. I want to say thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate that. I wish you all a blessed Lord's Day. And until next time we speak, may the Spirit of truth guide you in all truth as you read and study God's Word. Good night, everybody.